Lacrosse community. My name's Ryan Berns. I'm the founder of the Lacrosse Leadership Institute. It's our mission to empower all those that love lacrosse, to recognize the skills you gain from the sport to ultimately live your best life possible. Today, we're joined by Eric Ruppel, who's been all around the West Coast, the middle of the West Coast, and been at the forefront of some of the lacrosse out here with MCLA, and ultimately now is the head coach at Quincy University. Eric, we're so excited to get you on the podcast today. For those in our community that aren't quite aware of your story, can you share a little bit? How'd you get involved in lacrosse in the first place?
Oh, by happenstance at the best, but isn't that everyone's story? I started as a three-sport athlete in Vegas, and about the middle of my high school career, a couple of my buddies started playing, and I had always watched it. I think this is right about that time the MLL had those weird ESPN pre-recorded Tuesday games for the MLL. And so I knew what it was. I had an 8th grade coach who was from Long Island, and he kept saying, "Oh, Vegas needs lacrosse, Vegas needs lacrosse." Well, it finally happened. So they started playing. I bought a stick. I started playing with them. This was in the real infancy of Nevada lacrosse in general. Reno didn't have teams yet. Vegas only had about 4 of them that were consistent. And so it was just very, very young, very bare bones. And once I got to college, all my buddies that were playing jumped on the club team. It was the second year UNLV ever had a club team. And I said, yeah, absolutely. I'll go do that. That sounds like a blast. And so in college, I really started to take it seriously and wanted to play and wanted to develop. And at that same time is when Las Vegas started to feel its first boom of lacrosse, if you will. More teams were being added, specifically youth. And so we all got kind of put to work as the UNLV club team coaching around town, which is how I got the coaching bug. But it was an awesome experience because now, and we'll use this as last week as the example, I went out to the challenge to recruit, watching the Vegas Stars play and see where they've come from compared to where we started has just been a phenomenal just exposure. And I got to give shout out to the godfather of Las Vegas lacrosse, Gary Campo. Without him, I don't think half of us from Vegas would be here today doing what we do in the communities. There's a few of us coaching around in college, a bunch at high school levels. He really helped pioneer that. He was my college coach for the last 2 years, my junior senior year, and that's when we really started to see the uptick, start getting good in the MCLA, start winning some meaningful games, and he kept us close. So shout out to him. But it's been a wild experience because it feels like every team I've ever been on has been startup.
It seems like it from the stories that I've been hearing from you, Eric. You start in Nevada, not a whole lot of teams, get on that second team at UNLV, and now you're starting up at Quincy. Can you share a little bit about what you guys are up to right now?
Oh, absolutely. So we're in year 3 of the program. Shout out to Quincy University. They elected in 2018 to start a program. I ended up getting hired previously. I had coached in Texas. I did a little bit of high school coaching in Texas and a little bit of MCLA coaching in Texas. Got an opportunity to go up to the college ranks at Adams State. So got my feet wet in the RMAC. And they ended up hiring me here at Quincy. Our first AD was pretty smart about it. He looked at the other teams in the GLVC. He kind of saw where everyone was from. And he was an East Coast guy himself. So he kind of knew the East Coast kids, they can throw a rock and hit about 5 lacrosse schools. So he wanted someone who could bring in some of those West Coast kids that don't get those opportunities. We've seen it with the NDNUs of the world. They struggle to keep teams. They were good for a while, but really it's just been those 4 RMAC teams. And so when I interviewed with him, he said, well, what do you feel about the West Coast? And I said, it's the West Coast. Exactly. But so I was very lucky and fortunate to get the job here. Year 1 of recruiting went fairly well. We're in a little bit of a niche area. We're in the exact middle of the country, right on the Mississippi River. So it takes a special kind of person to fly into Chicago or St. Louis and then drive up or down a couple hours to get to Quincy. But I had a vision in my head. I felt we could do it. And our roster doesn't lie. We've got a bunch of kids from Seattle, a couple from California, Colorado, Canada, We found the right kids that were willing to do it. Quincy's a small school environment. We have about 1,000 students, what I like to call very comfortable learning. Graduating from UNLV, I was in a bunch of those 189 lecture classes. Don't remember much. These kids are in, 25, 20 person classes. They know their professors by name. Their professors know them by name, good or bad. And so we kind of had to sell a vision. And year one, that's all we had. We didn't have a locker room yet. We didn't have gear yet. We had the field. Our stadium is beautiful, 3,000 seat stadium. It's got some press box suites. It's aesthetically gorgeous. But that's all we had. We had mock-ups of jerseys, mock-ups of helmets, mock-up of decals, but these kids really had to just close their eyes and envision what it could be. Out of that, we got 16 or 17 the first year that were bought in. And at the same time, you're recruiting 2 classes. You feel behind the whole time because as our 20 class was coming on campus, our 21s were coming on campus. So a lot of our second class, we had never played a game yet as we're recruiting them. But this time, by the time we get to the point where we actually have some practices and some games going, we've got some gear. Kids can see the hustle, the effort, practice, all that. Then it started to get a little bit easier to bring them here to campus and share the vision, if you will. And then year one, catastrophe happens. 5 games into the season, my guys are just starting to gel, just kind of starting to figure it out, and COVID hits. And so we're starting a team from scratch in the middle of the Midwest, and COVID just knocks out everything. We were actually the last Division II game played. Our game against Huntsville was the last game ever played for D2 in 2020, which was kind of a cool feeling. We rushed everything that night. Myself and the Huntsville coach, he's like, "Hey, we have to do senior night tonight." Yeah, no problem. Like, we know we're going home tomorrow. We're not continuing spring break. And that put a little damper on it, I would say. We didn't know who would return, who would stay committed now that this mass pandemic happened. And it did affect our recruiting a little bit. A few guys that we had signed, mom and dad said, "No, we don't want you on flights. We don't want you that far from home based on COVID." But our guys that were already bought in stayed, which now in year 3 is actually proving to provide some dividends. But to start a program from scratch, and I know at the D2 level, there's 5 of us that probably all have the same story. You're starting this program, you're trying to get it off the ground, you're trying to get guys going, and then they have to go home for 9 months. It was March 17th, I think they left. And we didn't see him again until about middle of August. And then who knows what we could do. We had to start with small group practices, just stick skills because you couldn't hit each other. And then we had to do the masks, and then we had to do this. So it made last year, for better or worse, pretty interesting. We as a conference, and shout out to all of us in the GLVC as coaches, we came together very early and said, we got to play. So we were one of the first conferences to elect to go conference only. And so a couple of us that were the startup teams, we knew we would take our licks. A few of the teams in the GLVC are worth their weight in gold, so to speak. But we knew we would take our licks, and we knew our guys would only grow from it. My freshman class, only 5 games into the season, didn't quite get to gel yet, essentially freshmen again. Then you bring in about 15 more freshmen, play a 10-12 game conference only schedule. 8 of their games become top 20 games. They're going to grow up pretty quickly. And we saw that statistically. We struggled in the win column, but we didn't really focus on the win column year 1. We focused on growing culture and just kind of refining what we could control, control what you can control. And so, first thing we started to tackle was turnovers. Then we started to tackle shots on games. Then we started to tackle goals per possession defensively. And we just built it brick by brick slowly because we knew we weren't going to go out and just dismantle anyone. Just COVID had us going, and then it didn't, and then that. So we just kept it pretty simple. We kept some in-team goals. And by the end of the season, unfortunately, the last 2 games of the season were canceled due to COVID. So we actually haven't finished the season yet, but not by our own will. Pandemic takes it out. Our guys were pretty upset about it. but we were heading in the right direction. We get some more recruits on campus. We start to fill in our 21 class. And now we're rolling. You know, this fall was what I would call the best fall we've ever had on campus, because fall year one, no one knew each other. Fall year two, practice got a little dicey depending on what the CDC said. Fall three, guys are rolling. They know each other. They've known the commits. They've known the new kids on campus. We get to play some fall ball games for the first time since year one. We do really well in that. We keep track of everything. We just keep building and building and building, and just getting them on the right page. Just because from our perspective, we get rolling and then we just shut down completely. And so it was a pretty hard roadblock going into year one, but now year three, we're really happy with where we're looking. And a lot of that, I can't say enough, is based on the guys. During those COVID years, it was focusing mostly on culture of the team, because we didn't know if we could practice that week or positive tests or just whatever happened. So we did a lot of things internally as a team that really kept the guys together, kept them motivated, just kept them gelling. And it's, like I said, it is absolutely noticeable this year how they're doing. They'll still have a little bit of a struggle, you know, on paper, eligibility wise. Our oldest guys are sophomores, but we are absolutely trending in the right direction and pretty happy about that.
Well, Eric, I think the most impressive thing is the fact that you are dealing with this adversity in a way that's appropriate, and that's controlling what you can control. We can't worry about what's going on in regulation in other places. And it's just like a game. You can't worry about the refs or the other team. It's focus on yourself, focus on your own game, understand how you can do better. And that's the aspect of life that's so important as well. We don't know what hand we're going to be dealt, but we know how we're going to look at it and how we're going to adapt and make changes to be successful. When you look over your career so far, whether it's playing lacrosse or coaching lacrosse, do you have a pinnacle moment, or what are some of the moments that really stick out to you?
You know, just because of what I'm currently doing, I feel like I should say I don't have a pinnacle moment yet. It's yet to come. But I have a couple as a player. You know, when Campo came in at UNLV, we had completely turned the tide. Freshman year, we did okay. We only won a couple games. We were still pretty young. Sophomore year, we did really well, but we were an MCLA D2. Campo comes in, says, no, you're a Division I university. You're going to play MCLA D1. And by our senior year, we were above 500 easily. I think we actually finished that season 700. Unfortunately, we lost to ASU, but I won't hold that against you. But I would say as a player, that was absolutely huge for us. Just seeing, and I relate it now. I try not to tell the guys that, but you know, my freshman year, UNLV struggled. Our senior year, we no longer struggled. We were placed well where we should be. As a coach in high school, Texas is wild, and I would say going to the Texas State Championships was amazing. That was fantastic. We went to the Final Four. Everything's bigger in Texas. I go from playing in these, you know, in Vegas, it's little parks and that, to 17,000 seat high school stadiums. Wild. But yeah, I would say as a coach, building this team will lead to my pinnacle moment. And I'm very excited and happy to say that. I think it'll come in time. And we're on the right track for that.
Eric, I'm glad that you're still approaching that pinnacle. You've hit some in the past, but those are those growing phases. We get to understand where we've been. We'll go through a little bit of a pullback. We'll get a new height. And that's just what we see over and over again. And it reminds me of what you said earlier about your players. Your players face a lot of adversity. 8 of the games, it sounds like, we're against top 20 opponents. Iron sharpens iron. That's the only way you're going to get better. And it's facing that extreme challenge and rising to the occasion. Even if you don't perform as well as you wish you would have, you can learn from there and grow. We were talking before we started about the fact that from fall ball to now, this is the third practice of the spring season. You guys didn't have a whole lot of rust, and that's something that some coaches battle. It's the players go away for winter, they hang out with their family, their friends, they're not necessarily doing what needs to be done, but you guys instilled a lot of integrity in the players, and it seems like there's a culture that's built around success and doing the little things right. How do you build that culture, or what does leadership mean to you?
From the very beginning, it's been kind of the do as I do mentality with everyone, myself included. Year one, I'd grab the ball bucket. They would grab the goals. I'd grab the ball bucket. Little things like that would just kind of instill the snowball effect. We're not better than this. I know a lot of, call it what it is, a lot of teams, the freshmen grab cages. Our guys instilled it very quickly that we haven't proven ourselves. We haven't done anything. Everybody grabs cages. Everybody ball hunts. Everybody does everything for everyone. So much so that my captains have assigned laundry groups for their team gear. Once a week, new set of 4 have to do everybody's laundry, but it's everyone, captains included, sophomores included. And I just think that all for us mentality is the right way to go about things. We don't have any seniority issues, blessing and a curse because we just don't have any seniors. But our first class, we still have 10 on the team from the initial 17, which is huge for us. And they're the ones that instilled that. They're the ones that said, I'm not better than that. I haven't done anything yet to prove it. And then even in the fall, winning a couple fall ball games and starting to get momentum, I think helped knock off some rust. The boys were highly motivated at the end of fall ball to not stop. The NCAA makes us sit down for a few weeks, sit down for winter, then we can resume in spring, but the boys didn't want to stop. And so when they got home, and again, they live all over the country in Canada, they made sure to hit the wall. They made sure to stay in shape. They made sure to get in the gym and just do what they needed to so they didn't regress come spring. It just kind of happened organically. A couple things we did to start this program is we had very few transfers. We had very few guys that went, well, this is how it's here. No one knew. They wanted to create their own identity, create their own traditions, create everything from scratch. And that's how we're starting to see that, because now the traditions are being created. Now, the system is kind of in place. It's still a little young. This is the first year where I've really felt, okay, these boys got it. And now it's just a ticking time bomb before good things start to happen. But I mean, that's 100% on the guys. We can only enforce what we can enforce. It's up to them to listen and do it. And I've got an entire team of guys who think the same way. We're going to listen. We're going to do it. We're going to make it happen. No one is big enough to pick up a snow shovel this week. And they love it here. And they're proud of, they're proud of their locker room. They're proud of their field. They're proud of our weight room. I mean, from a weight room perspective, it's amazing because we'll go in there 7 a.m. You got to wake up early and prove it. And that weight room is spotless by the end of the weight session. And everything goes back in its place. Everything gets wiped down. Everything gets clean. Regardless of how they found it, we're leaving it spotless for the next team that has to go in there. And that's on them, just wanting to take care of their environment, take care of their university.
Oh, and that makes it so exciting. I really like the idea of the all for us mentality. No one's better than anyone else. We're all in this together. And you can really sense the chip on everyone's shoulder. And the willingness.
It's there.
It seems like it. We see a lot of leaders that have to take on or make tough decisions. And it's sometimes something that goes against what's popular or against what the team maybe wants at the time. Have you found yourself having to make some tough decisions, or how do you go about making those tough decisions? And can you share an example with us, please?
Nothing that no other team does, but year one with 17 freshmen running around campus, not, away from home for the first time. Our closest guys are from St. Louis. So everybody is essentially a flight away, and now they're away from mom and dad. Now they got to test the waters. Year one, there might have been a guy or two standing in the middle of the field while a few guys were running, or flipping very large tires or whatever have you. But the ownership that came out of that immediately, just, hey, this isn't just being away on college and hoping for the best and partying. This is, you came here to do a job. And it took a minute, but, college kids. I was a college kid. You were a college kid. We get it. But the switch that flipped, we had one player who was real on the fence year one, and the things that he has absolutely done. You know, he was one that first few weeks of fall ball, year one, standing in the middle of the field, watching everybody run for his mistakes. Now, 2.5 years later, the things he's doing for our school and the things he's doing in our community. You know, this past fall, we started youth lacrosse in Quincy. Wish me luck. But I mean, he's active in his major. He's communications. We have sports broadcasting, so he's doing play-by-play on some of the games. You know, soccer and football and what have you. He's breaking down film for the communications department for all the QU TV news stuff. He's just actively involved in everything he can be. He runs the student activities committee at this point. You want to talk about a 180. You know, on the fence year one, really not sure if he's going to hack it. In year three, he's now cemented in campus. Huge win. If this all fails, he's my pinnacle moment. But just little stuff like that. You know, we didn't put up with it year one. We didn't care if there were only 17 guys. You know, and you do see it all the time in some programs. They go, well, you need me. And we said, no, we don't need you if you don't want to be here. And, you know, we had some guys leave the program. That happens every year. The guys that didn't want to be here aren't here anymore. The guys that want to be here are. And, you know, it's starting to become a lot of them want to be here. And a lot of them want to do the right things. And just watching that growth with what should be juniors through the past 3 years has just been phenomenal. You know, they came in. Then a freshman class came in and the sophomores said, hey, this is how we're trying to do stuff, but we only got to be here for 6 months before we had to leave. And then now with this new class coming in, you know, everybody, again, all for us mentality, they watch out for each other. They make sure that people are trying to be on the straight path. They protect each other, which is huge. That's all you can ask for as a coach. You know, I'm only with them at max 4 hours a day, unless they're in my office bothering me. You know, the rest of school, who knows? You know, we're to the point we don't really have to watch, just make sure they're in class anymore. Their grades speak for themselves. If we know they're doing the right things on campus, we're ecstatic with them. They just want it. And a part of it probably helps. There is a little bit of a chip on our shoulder. You know, this year we feel like we've got a lot to prove. Year one, unforeseen. Year two, we go into a gauntlet and we just can't hold up as well as we thought we could. Year three, now the ball's flying around. There's less turnovers. There's goals being scored. There's defensive plays being made. Transition is happening. Now the boys see it on the field, and so they're making sure it happens off the field. And we're happy.
Oh, and that's the exciting part of lacrosse. We know how much fun it can be with the ball flying around, cool plays happening both sides of the field, and you get pride in that ultimately. But it doesn't just come naturally as we're sharing. It takes a lot of work, a lot of prep for a long time to get there. And I have to imagine seeing this maturation of your players turning into better athletes, better lacrosse players, but better people is ultimately one of the most rewarding things. And I could see that as Pinnacle. And hopefully that's not the only thing that happens, but you get some success. I think naturally that's what we see from other successful leaders is high standards, that extreme accountability from everyone produces better and better results. You get challenged, you rebound, you move forward from there. And Eric, you're doing all the right things. I know we're closing up on time. Do you have any last thoughts on lacrosse or leadership you can share with our community?
I just think don't get too caught up in the moments. I had a mentor. I'll name drop him, you know, Carl Lynch. Got to name drop him. So, because I'm sure in 2 hours he's going to watch it. He told me when I was in Texas, good teams will lose. If you play good teams and you're a good team, you will lose eventually. It's what you do after that loss that will kind of define you. And I'm seeing that a lot in youth lacrosse these days. You know, a lot of these ultra select teams at 12 and 13, and they're letting, a couple losses define them. A few tournaments have ranking systems at this point for young guys, and they're still just kids. They're still learning. They're just happy to be there. And we start to add things to it. And, those kids are just going to think one mentality quickly. And that one mentality, it'll work until it doesn't, like Mike Tyson said, everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the mouth. What are you going to do once you get punched in the mouth? And what you can do after that is far more important than what you did before.
Yeah, absolutely. And you seem to be able to go a lot further after you get punched in the mouth when you're surrounded by a bunch of other great people. And that's the neat thing with a team sport like lacrosse, is you have to figure out how to relate to one another, how to grow with one another, and ultimately make sure that you can be successful with one another. So Eric, thanks for sharing all this with us. We know you've been starting up lacrosse programs since basically you got into lacrosse. It's really cool what you guys are up to in Quincy, and we're so excited to follow you guys moving forward. Can't thank you enough. Thank you.
Oh, thank you for having me. This was wonderful.